Welcome into the latest edition of the Spotrac Podcast. Brandon Kravitz here, along with the money man himself, Mike Ginnitti. Today's episode brought to you by AuthenticAudioPro.com. Real professional radio ads and podcast production for a fraction of the price. AuthenticAudioPro.com. Dog days of the summer are creeping up. How are you coping with this? Because I'm having to have a chat with myself on the daily at this point, Mike. Like, it's going to be okay. We're going to make it through.
Yeah, look, the NFL-driven world is certainly coming to a halt if we're going to open with Nico Collins and Jauan Jennings today. But I've actually started to dive into this college stuff, kind of heavy hitting here. It's really fascinating. It's truly the wild, wild west. There's no reason to talk about it yet, Brandon, because I don't have my head wrapped around anything, and I think that's the whole point, right? Nobody really knows what the hell is going on with it. But at some point in time, this has to get more formalized, right? I mean, I kind of posted this morning that we have to get some kind of players association, some leadership, some collective bargaining, because right now it's just nil and unlimited roster sizes and unlimited transfers. And then you've got this revenue sharing piece coming down within the next 12 months. So I think it's fascinating where it's all going and what kind of appendages may come from this in terms of football and basketball. But I'm at least starting to wrap my head around that as in this NFL downtime, right?
Okay, so wasn't planning on starting with this, but I do have a question in that regard, because I wonder if this is perhaps the way that this goes. If you were to collectively bargain, that means that there's a union. When there's a union, that also means that there's uniform payment across the board, at least to some degree. There's a minimum, there's a maximum, there's a cap, and all of that stuff that we talk about on the regular basis with professional sports, but there's less of a pool. And so everybody can make a decent amount of coin. You're not going to pay the captain of the volleyball team the same amount of money that you pay the captain of the football team. That's just not the way it works. But if everything were collectively bargained, then that is the way that it would work. So I wonder if we see you can opt in to the college sports union and you get a base pay for that, which your standard rowing athlete would absolutely sign that paperwork.
Yeah.
Whereas maybe the quarterback or the star wide receiver doesn't, so that they're still able to make a larger amount of money. Is that a possibility in the way that this works, where the bigger stars are not interested in this union because they're good?
I'll say that's definitely something I've read, right? I mean, I'm trying to read every angle possible. That is certainly one way to go. And the end of every paragraph that I read comes with, however, comma, there will be lawsuits. Literally every time. Every idea comes with the idea that there's going to be an antitrust lawsuit no matter what we do here, right? Because the ability for a quarterback to earn the nil money only if he opts out of a base salary, I think that's kind of illegal, right? Like, I don't know that that's very fair either. So it's just a mess. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation. I think you and I have talked about this a little bit, and maybe we can just kind of cap it here. I think at the end of the day, the best approach for where things are headed is just to split football and maybe even basketball off into their own entities, and then treat the other sports. And I don't mean to downgrade them, because I think I enjoy them as much as football at times. Treat them maybe with this revenue sharing system so that they are all on equal levels and at least being compensated properly. And then just kind of let football and basketball do their own big time animal things. And oh, by the way, still have the big boys trickling down some revenue to the smaller sports as well in terms of revenue. But I don't know. I mean, I'd even hate to see that.
That creates a headache too, because
huge.
The example that I was using is trying to figure out how there's fairness between football and some of the zero to negative net revenue sports. But you even have that issue within those sports themselves. There's a huge difference between Alabama football and Nevada football. So are they splitting revenue the way that the Cowboys and the Packers do? Because there's no way Bama would ever sign off on that.
No,
those type of schools.
It'd be a massive conference, correspondence situation where there's either a Power Four or every conference treats things differently, and then you start to talk about the shift in power of balance and all that stuff. But there's no easy answer, and that's why this has never even been approached. But now we're here, and it feels like things are going 1,000 miles an hour, but there's still no answer, and there's no good solution. Right. I keep seeing, Greg Sankey and all these really high important people in this game basically tweeting ideas. That's how lost people are, right? Like they're just throwing shit out to the wind right now, Brandon, hoping something sticks. There's no good answer, and I just have a feeling that it's going to be, let's try this lawsuit. Let's try this lawsuit. And it's going to really hurt college athletics as a whole. So I'm at least trying to understand the semantics of it, but I don't know. This might be more famine than feast when it's all said and done. It truly might be.
Well, it just goes to show that it's a lot easier to not pay your workforce than to pay them, because it creates all sorts of headaches.
Lawsuit.
Not an issue in the NFL, though. We got word that Nico Collins had signed an extension this week, 4 years, $75.8 million. What do we know about the terms of this deal with the Houston Texans?
Yeah, I love it. Didn't see this one coming. He was on the short list because there were some rumblings, but after the Stephon Diggs acquisition and kind of retool of that contract, I sort of thought they were going to ride this out for one more season. They didn't, and he gets a nice raise. He was due to make $3.5 million this year. He's not going to make 19.2. So this is a role situation, right? This isn't just about keeping him for the future. There's a world where they view Nico Collins as the true WR1 on this team, and I get it. He's shown that kind of flash at times. It's just been a smaller sample size. But in the grand scheme of things, right, 24.2 per year, it's really a 3 for 54 over the next 3 seasons. Those are kind of old school numbers, $18 million a year for this guy. If he's the actual number one option for CJ Stroud for the next 3 seasons, there's value in what they've just done, even though the starting point was a lot lower than many of these other receivers were getting to. So again, in the grand scheme of things, really after the next couple of months, after CD and Chase and Justin Jefferson do their damage, this is going to be a flash in the pan contract. And fantasy owners and certainly Houston Texans fans may absolutely love what's happened here for the next 2 to 3 seasons.
Well, absolutely. And so we know that the Justin Jeffersons and Jamar Chases of the world, they're going to reset the position. Nico Collins is really good. He's not a reset the position type of player. I guess this is more in line with, I'm looking at Calvin Ridley's deal, 4 years, $92 million, 46 guaranteed. It's more of that sort of, you're a number one. You're just not
a star,
a game breaker.
Yeah.
Superstar.
Yeah, but I'll say this: at 18 a year for the next 3 years, that screams underpay for me. I'll just say that it's not. It's
especially
probably,
if he does it again.
Yeah, it's probably fair value, but where this market is going, and where it's been going for the past two off seasons, I do think this is going to get absolutely swallowed up as quickly as humanly possible. And oh, by the way, Michael Pittman Jr.'s contract kind of looks a lot like this, and I value him a heck of a lot higher than I do Nico Collins when it's all said and done. So we've had a couple of wide receiver deals kind of get suppressed a little bit based on where I think they could have gone had they run themselves into free agency a little bit longer. So for as many eye-popping numbers as we've seen, we've got a couple of nice ones sitting out there, and I put this in the fair market value category for sure.
So, I'm not going to break any news here, but the new formula in the NFL, if you're able and lucky enough to pull it off, is supercharging an offense around rookie quarterback contracts. Tua and the Miami Dolphins are a good example of that. CJ Stroud now with the weapons they have, Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Joe Mixon. It's just crazy what you can pull off. Look at the 49ers. However, this is not foolproof. I was looking at, and this is a little reductive to just say that this is the only way to judge success, but ultimately everyone's trying to win a Super Bowl. 5 of the last 6 Super Bowl winners, in my opinion and my assessment, do not qualify for the, hey, get a quarterback on a rookie deal, supercharge an offense, we'll go win a championship. So it's not foolproof. You still need that superstar, and it is okay if you pay them. You just better get it right. So it seems like, well, this is the new formula. It's not like it's the one-size-fits-all way to win a championship.
No, and it's becoming less and less, right? So your argument is still valid, but I have a feeling within the next 5 years we're gonna be looking around the room saying, "Man, I'm not even sure getting to that second contract is safe anymore," and that's going to be a problem, by the way. But we'll see if it actually happens. Because look, they're getting there, Brandon. They're getting to the Super Bowl. Brock Purdy, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, right? Nick Foles. These are all in the last. These are 4 of the last 6 Super Bowls have had a starting quarterback on a rookie contract. So they're getting there. They're not necessarily winning for whatever reason, but they're getting
Because
there.
they're playing
So
against Mahomes and Brady is mostly the reason.
that's mostly the reason. Yeah, that's right. And that's not going away anytime soon. But I do have a feeling that one of these rookies, at least, is going to get to the finish line. We saw it with Russell Wilson about a decade ago now. My goodness. It's rare, but I have a feeling that the way things have transpired, we will eventually go on a run with rookie quarterbacks winning Super Bowls because of the way that you're able to ramp up off seasons because of the salary cap, right? Because if you've got a quarterback making, taking on a $5 million cap charge in a salary cap world of 260, 270, you're affording yourself the ability to maneuver with maybe 50, 60 every March. And that's at least 3 max players, if that's how you want to look at it, right? From an NBA standpoint, it's at least 3 max players. So it's insane what teams are able to do quickly on the fly here. It's why really nobody is ripping the Band-Aid off truly anymore, unless you're the Carolina Panthers. And it should be good for football. It really should be good for football, unless we get to a point where teams decide we're not going to pay $300 million anymore. And I don't see that happening because special is special. But we've seen it now with more and more positions kind of every offseason, right? I think the off-ball linebacker is starting to have that moment. Safeties are starting to have that moment. So that's a little bit troublesome. So that's the counterpoint to where you're going with things. But no question that at the end of the day, it's still the elite superstar top 5 quarterbacks that really make a difference.
Yeah, and we're also seeing that that's probably not going to slow down anytime soon because most of the good teams at this point have quarterbacks that are getting locked up to long-term massive contract deals. So like anything else in sports, we talked about this last week with NBA trends. Well, a trend is only as good as the moment that you're living in.
Yeah.
And with Josh Allen getting paid, Lamar got paid, Tua's about to get paid, Trevor's about to get paid, Burrow got paid, Mahomes, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Jordan Love's about to get a deal. At some point, all of the good teams that have good quarterbacks that are good enough to get to the playoffs and win playoff games, if all of those guys are on big-time deals, then the trend is going to point in that direction because it's just an overwhelming percentage.
Yeah, and we're seeing the quarterbacks getting paid as quickly as humanly possible. So while there is value for 2.5, 3.5 years, generally speaking, they're going to be inside of $40 to $60 million per year within the 4th year of their rookie contract. So it's the timeline for it to happen is small, but you can really manipulate things properly with the salary cap to extend your run, and it's year 3, year 4 of that extension where things start to get dicey. That's Josh Allen right now. We saw what happened with Mahomes. They had to actually renegotiate things a little bit on his deal. And certainly we've seen the rosters flex accordingly. So it's complicated, but I will say this. It's always important to say this out loud. The salary cap has continued to bail out these teams, right? That's why the Chiefs can continue to do what they do. That's why the Rams have stayed relevant despite a ton of dead cap, and they've got more this year with Aaron Donald. If you know what you're doing, and if you have plan A, plan B, and plan C all in place, the league salary cap, the financial health of this league should allow you to continue to roll, not so much in dynasty mode, but at least in contention mode indefinitely. So I do think you're right that those elements are not going away. I do think, though, we're ripe for one of these young kids to come up and steal the show. That's all I'm saying.
So I'll ask, then I'll spin this in this direction. CJ Stroud, the Houston Texans right now feel like the best example of a team realizing what they have in their young quarterback, and they're trying to build a Super Bowl contender around him before they have to get to the point where they've got to start shedding some salaries around the quarterback. Who else qualifies in that discussion as we enter into the 2024 season? It's Houston, and who else that is doing this just maybe a little bit more under the radar?
Well, certainly the Niners at Brock Purdy have been doing this for 3 straight off seasons, right? We saw the Bosa contract, and Kittle's contract was a couple years ago, and et cetera, et cetera. So they've been benefiting from this wholeheartedly without question. I would even say that the Bears, just in the past 3 months, they knew they were going to have Caleb Williams 7 months ago. You know what I mean? This was not a slow drip process. They started the shed cap at the end of last season, and they started to add immediately via trade and certainly via free agency. They are already in kind of full motion. And to some degree, the Commanders have as well. The Commanders have had a sneaky good offseason, not just from a roster standpoint, but from a front office, a scouting, and analytics standpoint. Every single time I open up Twitter, I see a new acquisition, a new hire to that staff, and I get a whole bio about, the technology background and the sports background and the science background, and they are not screwing around on that Washington front office. This is no longer Dan Snyder's team. Let's put it that way. So maybe that's the team that from a roster standpoint has kind of snuck under the radar a little bit. Lots riding on Jane Daniels, of course, but I do think that could be maybe a 0 to 60, 0 to 70 organization, even in 2024, especially when you kind of look around that NFC East and maybe groan a couple times at what you might be seeing.
Well, it was my low-key way of asking who should I be placing futures bets on, and I think you just nailed a good one. Yeah. Thank you for that. I don't know the number. I'm gonna have to look this one up real quick, but I'm assuming the Commanders win total over under isn't any higher than 6.5. So
yeah, maybe the make the playoffs bet is the way to go. Make the postseason, Washington Commanders. How about that one?
Commanders win total. Let's see if I can pull this up really fast. Nope, that's gonna take more of a search. Oh, 6.5. I was right.
You nailed it.
All right. How about that? Future odds maker over here. Let's talk about Drake May. He signed a rookie deal, 4 years, $36 million. Other rookies starting to sign deals as well. Is there anything that is standing out to you, or is this just business as usual because everything is already sort of structured and in place?
Yeah, I'll just do kind of a deep dive on how these first rounders generally look, right? It's a 4-year contract, fully guaranteed. There's a 5th-year option for the most part. And pretty much every first rounder I've seen to date, there's offsetting roster bonuses that are paid out in training camp. They're fully guaranteed. So basically, these players are on a minimum salary in terms of their base salary, but they get a nice big offsetting roster bonus in training camp. So it's early cash in hand. It kind of helps for some other issues as well in terms of like if this player has to be traded, maybe there's a way to move some of that money earlier than later instead of having it all built into 18 weeks of base salary. So you'll see that on some of these cap breakdowns. Again, fully guaranteed. It's just kind of cash, not cap situation, and there's offsets with basically every single contract that I've seen. So that means these players are not able to double dip. Most of these guys have not been able to work that out. Caleb Williams, we'll see if he can forego offset language, although he's doing this without an agent. Marvin Harrison Jr. does have offsets. He operated without an agent, and obviously he's got a lot more negotiation stuff going on in his life, not just his rookie contract, which is now signed. But for the most part, standard business as usual. We'll start to see some of the higher profile names sign, maybe even, I would say, closer to training camp, right? Some of these guys hold out to the very last second because of that offset language, but most of the guys are getting things done now with OTAs basically in the books.
So we're talking about these teams hitting the ground running with their young quarterbacks. So you have a bunch of new ones that are being ushered into the league, some of which you just mentioned right there. Jaden Daniels are expecting big things from with the Commanders. We know that Caleb Williams was already named the starter, which is hilarious. That was at the day one OTA. Congratulations, kid. You're the starter. You don't have to fight for anything. And then Michael Penix is the opposite end of the equation. He's got no chance of being the starter in an offense with Kirk Cousins. For the other guys, Drake May, he's got Jacoby Brissett standing in his way, so it's not a lock. Jaden Daniels has Marcus Mariota, probably beats him out, but they could play that game. JJ McCarthy has Sam Darnold, which I think is a little more dicey. Bo Nix has Jarrett Stidham and Zach Wilson. Now, are any of those guys that I just mentioned auto starts week 1 guaranteed? Or do you think that there's a battle, at least a fake battle that we have on our hands for some of these guys?
I did a piece on this actually about a week ago with some of those quarterback conversations, competitions, etc. Right, and you can even extend this out to like Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. Certainly, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are a summer competition to be watching closely. It feels like. It feels like Bo Nix would be the one that I'd say probably doesn't get the week 1 start. I think he came in the least NFL ready, even though maybe the most dynamic in college, right? I mean, an absolute touchdown machine, an absolute winning machine. And certainly McCarthy is in the same boat. I'll say this. I'll just give you my take quickly. I say Bo Nix is not a week 1 starter. I say JJ McCarthy is not a week 1 starter. Drake May is a week 1 starter, even though he probably shouldn't be. I'm just not high on him yet. Jaden Daniels is a week 1 starter. Certainly Penix is a no, and certainly Caleb Williams is a yes. So that's kind of how I read it right now, but that's subject to change for sure. But Brissett got $6.5 million guaranteed on an $8 million contract. Mariota got $5.5 million guaranteed on a $6 million contract. So that's upper echelon backup quarterback pay. So there's certainly at least an opportunity for them to win this job for week 1. But then it just becomes, at what point in time does it the power transfer, right? Is it week 6, week 7? Is there a bye week in place? It's just a matter of time. So really, it's semantics to talk about it now. But it's fascinating to kind of see who's going to get this thing out of the gate outside of Caleb Williams.
We're going to wrap today's episode with today's quick hits, and I left a little extra space here because I think one of these might send you into a tailspin mentally. The 49ers, not this one.
The
I'm 49ers coming. The 49ers signed Jauan Jennings through the 2025 season, 2 years, $15 million. They're investing a lot in that wide receiver room. Does that make you more or less confident that Brandon Ayuk has a pending deal with the San Francisco 49ers? Lock up Jauan Jennings, draft Ricky Pearsall in round 1. So where's the confidence level on this?
Yeah, it's an interesting way to look at it, right? At one point in time, I thought maybe Jennings would be the returner. It doesn't appear that's going to be the case. And if anything, Pearsall may be the returner this year for them. So it may be just that for at least for 2024, they want all their ducks in a row. Jennings was going to make about $5 million on his restricted tender this year. So they ripped that up and basically gave him a $10.5 million guarantee for the next 2 seasons. I haven't seen the details. I doubt that it's a base value of $15 million, right? It's probably closer to 11 or 12 million over 2 years. And in that regard, it's fine. How does it impact Ayuk? I don't think it does to much degree outside of that, we're not going to screw around with other players just because we can't get something done with you. So I like the effort. I like San Francisco. They've never really sat in their hands with this stuff. They need to make sure that Brock Purdy at least has the options in place. And yeah, I guess you could look at it as Pearsall takes over. It's Pearsall, Deebo Samuel, and Jauan Jennings in 2025, and that's at least plausible to enter March with. But I don't think it rattles the cages too much in terms of Ayuk. It just seems like that contract specifically, negotiation-wise, is a mile apart. It feels like Ayuk knows what he needs, approaching $30 million a year, and San Francisco's not coming close to it. And this could be a very, very long battle down the stretch here.
I mean, this is your world, and for anybody listening to this is the reason why is just to figure out how teams make this stuff work, because the 49ers are paying so many guys at different positions. I don't know how you fit Brandon Ayuk into that puzzle. I'm not
going to sit here and say he's not a trade candidate.
Off of one.
Yeah, he may still be an active trade candidate. They may still be fielding calls for him. I'm not sure how many teams are still left with cap space and, ample room to do that. But there's a world where everything's on the table with Brandon Ayuk right now, especially if the negotiations really are as far apart as the agent has sort of alluded to in the past couple of weeks.
All right, here it is. Jorge Lopez tossed from the 10-3 loss to the Dodgers for the New York Mets. Proceeded to throw his own glove into the stands, and then in the post-game media scrum said that he plays for the worst team in baseball, and was then subsequently cut by the team, who then held a players-only meeting. If you wanted a bullet point breakdown of what train wreck looks like for a franchise, this is it. But I'll let the Mets fan tell us what's going on.
Look, he's super honest and super passionate, and he's super generous and loves, he's trying to give souvenirs away at times. He loves them. He loves the Mets fans.
A good spin.
And, he anticipated, he had already heard from his agent that he probably wasn't going to be with the team, much longer. So he was just trying to go off with a bang. No, this is an absolute disaster. This is like the 8th rock bottom of the season. We're like 52 games in. I made a list this morning. There's 8 expiring contracts on this team that I think all will be traded within the next 2.5 months, even though none of them are playing well right now. It's just going to be somebody else's problem. Cohen's probably going to pay 85% of those salaries to get them off the roster and buy some prospects. It's going to be a nightmare, version 2.0, because last year was already a nightmare. This is a $310 million payroll right now. This is the highest payroll in baseball. This is the highest tax payroll in baseball. And they are one of the biggest standings and, I guess, PR disasters in all of sports. So transactions forthcoming, let's put it that way.
And when you look at just based on payroll and record, I think Jorge Lopez has a point. They're not technically the worst team in baseball, but based on expectation and who they're paying and what they're paying, he's actually right.
It's been a really tough 2 years for value play. Let's put it that way. They tried to buy a championship last year. They tried to buy themselves out of buying the championships this year, and it's gone about as poorly as humanly possible. So this is a model for what franchises should never ever do in this sport. Let's put it that way.
Well said. The latest coaching carousel in the NBA helped Ty Lue reach a new deal with the Clippers. He'll now be paid $14 million a year as that deal runs through 2029. How much did the Lakers help facilitate this deal? The fact that they had an opening.
Huge. Yeah, huge. There's no question that Ty Lue was on speed dial as soon as humanly possible this offseason. And that's how it works, right? You only need one other opportunity to leverage yourself into your own opportunity. So good for Ty Lue. We'll see what else happens with this Clippers rosters. We've talked about it quite a bit. I got to tell you, the other deep dive I've been doing is not only on college sports, but on this Intuit Dome, this Clippers arena. Have you had this discussion yet? Have you talked about these details yet? The facial recognition stuff and the wall and
the wall. I've talked about the wall, but I don't know about this other stuff.
Yeah, entering the arena using facial recognition. They want you in your seat as much as humanly possible. All concessions will be facial recognition for purchases. So you basically never have to use any devices. They want you active, watching the sport, in your seats. You'll get rewards based on how good of a fan you are using facial recognition. So if they notice that you're up and off your seat cheering and doing the chants, you'll get like concession rewards to your account. It's wild stuff, man. So yeah, they got to keep the best product possible on the court to go with the absolute, I guess, technological advancement circus that they have put into this arena, because it's really going to be a sticker shock news when this thing opens up next year. It's something special.
That's some NASA stuff right there.
Yeah.
What happens when twins go to the game? You know?
Leave it to you to poke a hole into something fun. Come on.
Is that my brand? I don't want that to be my brand.
Yeah. Negatives. Constantly negative radio.
You know? Guy. I have a lot of hours to fill. I have to think of every question possible. It's part of the job. Something that I noticed looking at the 4 teams that made it to the conference finals, you and I talked about this a bit on my show this week. All of their core guys, with the exception of Pascal Siakam on the Pacers, but it looks like Siakam is likely to sign a long-term deal with Indiana, which we figured when they made that deal for him. They're all locked in beyond this season. Is that a coincidence, or is this some sort of formula to success, that you have a sort of stability within your roster construction? We've got guys that we believe in, or we've got young players that haven't reached that point yet where we have to make those decisions. It just seems like I'm looking at what moves can be made in the offseason, and when you have 4 teams that make it to the end, you go, okay, well, what stars coming out of here? And there's really not a lot of options. Found it bizarre.
No, these 4 teams are going to run it back almost exclusively next year, maybe give or take some small role player depth moves. But you're not going to be watching many of these players walk into free agency next year, or even really be put on the trade block. Maybe 1 or 2 here and there. We talked about Karl-Anthony Towns possibly hitting there, etc. But for the most part, these teams are locked in. Is it a trend? Is it an anomaly? Is it a trend? I'd put it this way. It is really hard not to get an extension in the NBA right now. Okay. Really hard. You have to be, you have to have done something terribly wrong to not be under contract, because being under contract makes you valuable, even if you're not a good player. Being a trade asset, being able to be mathematically added into a trade for matching purposes is value. even if you're, a 9 points, 2 rebounds player. So for the most part, teams are just extending everybody to some degree so that they have the ability to operate as they want to. And that's the other part of it. All of these teams have constructed their roster in every asset possible. So there's a massive trade acquisition. There's a couple of homegrown players. There's a few free agents trickled in there. All of them have balanced roster management, which is the way to go. And maybe they've figured it out, kind of before most of the league has, right? Because teams like what LeBron is asking the Lakers to do every year in the offseason is just not sustainable. It's just not. They have forfeited the ability to trade because of the way that they've operated in LA for the last 5 years. They just can't do anything anymore. You have to leave every single possibility open every offseason because you never know who is going to be available. Every superstar sort of becomes available every now and then, and you have to be ready to pounce when it's there. And I think these 4 teams have been the example of that, including Boston last year with Jrue Holiday, which I think none of us really saw coming from a Milwaukee team that was in contention.
That's such a good point with LeBron James, and I think it's something that's missed on a lot of us. Because he's often called the worst GM in the NBA. That's a common opinion, and I don't think it's necessarily incorrect. But it's not just because of the players that he wants to bring in. It's the way in which he wants to structure a roster. Yeah. It's very 2010. It's not 2024. He wants to win right now in this moment, not create a window. And in today's NBA, you've got to create a window and then hope that you strike within that window.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And the way that those contracts are structured out there and the timing of it all, it kind of pigeonholed them over the next couple of off seasons. Yes, they got a couple of draft picks back that they can operate with, but it's going to be much easier said than done for teams like that just don't have the ability to maneuver like Miami will or Cleveland will, or certainly Boston has been doing over the past couple of off seasons.
Check out my website if you need a podcast assist, audio production, or content marketing of any kind. I can be your guy. AuthenticAudioPro.com. Hit rate and subscribe this very podcast. And make sure to visit Spotrac.com for all of the latest in the sports contractual world. The dog days of the summer continue next week with another round of episodes on this podcast feed. Thanks so much, Mike. We'll do it again.
Yep.